You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. In this episode, I got to speak with Kate Mines. Kate is an actor and now producer and writer. Not only has she had a recurring role on my favorite show, Grey's Anatomy, but she also recently produced and wrote the web series called Dropping the Soap, which you can find on Amazon. She tells us the whole story. It can be done, and it is not easy. And she gives some great advice about acting, like be the good guest at the dinner party. You can find us at theother50%.com to see bios, photos, the blog, the coffee cups, the t-shirts. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Podbay, all the places you get your podcasts. Also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those places. Please share it, leave a review wherever you listen to it. And I have another podcast called The Other 50%, a herstory of tech. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbay, Overcast, or on the Other 50% website. That's where I talk to successful women in tech and hear their stories. Okay, here's Kate. What is your job?
I'm an actor.
Tell me more.
That's my primary job, is being an actor. I moved here, what year? 2005, so 12 years ago. And I had a million sort of like survival-y type jobs, working at coffee shops and law firms and, I was a bookkeeper. I did it all.
As you do.
Yeah. And then about a year, basically right before Dropping the Soap, I just was like, all right, I'm going to take the plunge and sort of figure it out. And, the sort of leap and the net will appear.
Go back to, is that what you always wanted to do your whole life?
It's funny. So I did theater in middle school, and I went to this place called Stage Door, which is like this anyone who's listening who knows Stage Door is like, oh my God, Stage Door. It's this summer camp in upstate New York, and it's like Mandy Moore, Zach Braff, like all of these, Bryce Dallas Howard, all these people, Natalie Portman, all these people went there.
Oh, fun.
And so it was like this amazing place because it's a lot of people who, during the school year, sports are really big, and it's like not that cool to be in theater, right? And then you escape for the summer with all these people that it's like, there's just people on the piano all the time, like singing musical theater in all of our classes, or like there's like no sports.
Like this is where all your people are.
Yeah, it was just like my people, and I actually also played sports, but I was like, oh, it's there's someone else who like just listens to Rent on repeat, like for like 3 years. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't met any people like that before. So I did that. And then I remember when I was going to college, I said to my mom, like, it's just not practical to be an actor. Like I just, I have to come up with something like more practical. Cause my dad has a PhD, he's an economist, we're like very sort of literal,
very serious academic people.
Yeah, and like
do not become acting majors.
Yeah, there's like no artsy people really in my family. Not that they don't enjoy art, but they're just not like art people.
So where'd you go?
So I went to NC State my first year in Raleigh, which was like, I don't know why I did that. It was sort of like, it's like, I grew up in Maryland, so it was like sort of close. It had warm weather. When you're 18, you're totally unprepared to make those kind of decisions. And on the East Coast, nobody goes to community college, which I probably should have done. But I just sort of chose my major from a list. I think I was like a mass comm major or something totally arbitrary. And I was so miserable. After the first year, I was like, Mom, I can't do this anymore. And they had already paid for that, like the third semester. So like the first semester of my sophomore year. And they're like, just go back for that semester. We'll figure it out and you can leave. So I left and I moved to California because they were living in Davis in Northern California, and I ended up going to a conservatory up there, which was incredible. I was just like journaling and being like, the only thing that ever made me happy was doing theater.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
so you figured it out.
Yeah, and it was really inexpensive, and I could live at home, and I was just in conservatories. I was just taking acting.
It's heaven.
Yeah.
So how was that conversation with your parents? Were they like, yeah, okay, try that?
They were at that point, because it was like, I was so miserable. Like, the first year I was like not really, I was just sort of like, peace, I'm going to college. And then after like a semester went by, I was like calling them like all the time. So it went from being like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, like I'm an independent person, to like, I hate this. You know what I mean? It's like, felt like being, at summer camp and being homesick or something, except I was 19 and not 11 or whatever. They just ultimately wanted me to be happy, and also, saved them a lot of money for me to be living at home and going to a conservatory that was super cheap. And then I ended up graduating from Santa Cruz. I did conservatory and then went back and finished my BA, so I had a degree. Although
that's
that
smart.
was It's smart in theory, but like never has anyone been like, oh, you have a degree from UC Santa Cruz. We're definitely going to hire for you for this part. Like, it.
Well, I have an acting degree, and it's not doing anything for me.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I ultimately got an acting degree, and it's like it's done absolutely nothing for me. You know, like I would probably tell my younger self, like, just move to LA when you're 18 and like spend the money at a. You know, the studios are so expensive out here. It's kind of like going to college.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you're young enough to be development. Because I was 24 by the time I moved here, so they were like, "Oh, you're too old to be development." And I had no credits, obviously, when I moved here.
And what do you mean by development?
So, you know, when you're like 18 or whatever, they're willing to like take you on with no credits and like sort of develop you if you're really green. But when you're 24, especially as a woman,
you've almost aged out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just, I mean, being a 24-year-old white girl is literally the worst category to be in. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't look like Blake Lively, you know, if you can't fit in on a CW show, there's no place for you. You're not old enough to be a mom in commercials. And if you're not a supermodel, you can't be on TV. So it's just like...
So what did you do?
You know...
Were you able to still play high school at that point?
I did background as a living for the first like 6 months I was here. And I did like Gilmore Girls and all those kind of shows.
Yes.
I played like college and high school. Because it's funny, when I was 24, I looked like 16, and then when I hit like 25, 26, I suddenly looked 30. It's like I went from 16 to 30. But yeah, I was able to play high school. But in terms of like real, you know, not background, but actual acting jobs, there just wasn't a lot for like, you know, normal-looking 25-year-old white girls. It was not. The demographic was a very tough demo to be in. And then, you know, the first year I ended up landing this what was supposed to be a one-day co-star on Grey's, and then that just, like, they just kept bringing me back. And that was, I can't even tell you how that happened. It was just sort of like, I think for them it was a little bit like, oh, this person who shows up on set, she knows her lines, she keeps her mouth shut, she, like...
Professional.
We can just rely on her, and so I think they just have a pool of people that they just call back repeatedly.
That's great. So you did a lot of Grey's as what?
So I played Nurse Gloria on that show, and it's funny because I'll do like 2 or 3 in a season or more, and then like 3 years will go by, or like it's very inconsistent. Like I think the first episode I did was in 2005 or 2006. We were talking before we started about the Denny storyline.
You were there when Denny was getting his transplant.
That's right. In whatever the other hospital they went to get his... I mean, we shot it in downtown LA, but whatever the other hospital was that they went to get the heart for him.
Didn't they have to... Wasn't it Chicago or something?
I don't know.
Someone will know. Some super fan will know.
Yeah, I don't... That was my very first TV gig, so I was just, like, so panicked. I was like, oh my God, just don't mess this up.
Yeah, what's that like walking onto a show like that where it's so established? And were you a fan of the show before?
No, I had never seen the show.
I think that probably helps.
Yeah, and also, like, I was part of this, like, super integral, like, storyline that I had no... Like, had I known how... Like, when I say to people, I was in the scene where they went to get Denny's heart, anyone who's seen the show knows exactly what scene that is. Like,
of course.
It's such a pivotal moment, and I'm glad that I didn't know. Like, I've had a couple of experiences like that where, like when I shot Hurt Locker, I was shooting with these people that are... Well, they weren't yet, but they're all, like, big movie stars now, and I didn't know who they were. And I didn't look them up, thank God, so I wasn't intimidated at all.
So you weren't starstruck and...
No, like, we would go out and they would get recognized, and I'm like, who? Why do they recognize you?
Oh, are you somebody?
Yeah, like, we were out, we shot that in Jordan, and we were at a bar, and Anthony Mackie got recognized from 8 Mile, and I was like, I don't remember, like, I didn't know. And now, like I said, they're all, like, sort of big movie stars, but I think for me, not knowing is better, because, like, it puts too much pressure on you. And I also thought, like, after I booked Hurt Locker, I was like, oh, so this is my life now. I'm going to be, like, you know, jetting all over the world, shooting movies. Star. Yeah, like, literally, I had gotten, at the time I had a BlackBerry, and I had, like, the international one. I was like, oh, I need the international cell phone now because I'm, like, a movie star. And this guy, Christian Camargo, who was on the film, who works all the time, he was like, just so you know, like, this is never going to happen again. He's like, I've been a working actor for, like, 30 years. This will never happen again. And I was like, okay. And, of course,
you don't know.
And then also, like, my first TV gig turned into, 20 episodes. And so I thought, oh, you just book one TV gig. And, like, they just all turn into 20 episodes.
It's easy.
Yeah, and then, of course, that has not been the path at all. Like,
So then what has been the path? What happened?
The path has been like every working actor, right? Like, so the Grey's Anatomy thing has been awesome. It's gotten me in a lot of rooms, and also just financially it's good because the residuals, that show plays all over the world, and streaming and DVD, and you know, it's just if we turn on the TV right now, I'm sure we could find an episode.
Every device in my house is on a different season.
Yeah, no, totally. It's just playing all the time. So that's been, you know, sort of nice financially, and also just saying like, hey, I'm recurring on this show that's a hit show, helps you get other auditions, you know.
Sure.
But, you know, I'm doing the same grind as every other, you know, actor is doing, and that's sort of the reason why we created Dropping the Soap initially was like, hey, I just want to have tape on myself. Like, I had a bunch of stuff where I was playing a nurse, but that's obviously, that's not comedy, and my bread and butter was comedy when I was doing theater and Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff. I would always get this sort of like comedy roles, often intended for men, like, you know, playing the clown or the best friend or whatever.
Yeah.
And so my producing partner, Paul, and I did this play, and we were just sort of like, we just want to get tape, you know, and we had no idea where it would go. And then I had an audition yesterday for a show, and this woman, Lorna Johnson, brought me in, and she was like, oh, I'm such a fan of your show. And I literally, like, looked around the waiting room, although there was no one else in there, and because it was the first time I'd ever been sort of like recognized from the show, and she had seen it, and she'd been at the premiere, and she was friends with Ellie Canner, who's the director. They used to work in casting together 100 years ago. But like, it was this moment of like, oh, this is why I did all this. Like, that is the journey of the working actor, is like making stuff for yourself and like having one job lead to the next, and not knowing, like, you know, I just did an episode of American Crime that was on a couple weeks ago. That show just got canceled. Like, you just don't know where your next gig is coming from.
You have so little control over it.
Yeah, and it's hard.
Okay, so tell me this. How did it go from, hey, let's do something to get tape on ourselves, to I'm watching it on Amazon?
So that was a really long journey. It was, so we sort of shot these versions for basically no money. We, you know, bought people pizza and stuff like that.
Okay, so it looks like there's some money. So you're talking early days.
Yeah, this is something that you've actually never seen.
Let's back up for a second. You have a web series called Dropping the Soap.
That's right. We have a web series called
Let's
Dropping the
talk
Soap.
about what we're talking about.
Which is streaming now on Amazon and a bunch of other platforms. If you go to droppingthesoap.com, you can see the links to all the platforms. And it's basically behind the scenes of a soap opera, and Jane Lynch plays like the head of the network, and she comes in because the soap opera is failing, and she's coming up with all of these ways to save it. So she's firing people, and she's doing voting people off and doing all of these crazy antics. And I play the chief of surgery, and my producing partner and star of the show, Paul, plays the chief of police, and we hate each other off screen, or like behind the scenes, but we play sort of star-crossed lovers on screen, and he's actually married to someone else on the show, but we're, you know, I'm trying to become his wife on the show to secure my place in the show.
So it's a show within a show.
It's a show within a show. And the soap opera within the show is called Collided Lives, and every episode opens with a little, like, 2-minute snippet of Collided Lives, which is just...
It's hilarious.
Over-the-top ridiculous, like, vampires and aliens and shipwrecks. And so Paul had this idea, and we decided that we wanted to bring on a writer, and so we brought on this woman, Mandy Fabian, and you know, it was very collaborative. We sat around in you know, her living room or my living room, and we pounded out story and blah blah blah, and we decided to write it out. And you know, it went through many versions, and we had several agents, and we went back and forth, and ultimately we decided to get an independent financer and just shoot it ourselves. And what was so great about that is that we didn't answer to anyone. We could make any jokes we wanted. We didn't have to put in any brands, or it was like we had full control. And we also brought in Ellie Canner as the director, and we just sort of became this like band, the four of us, and
so fun.
Yeah, and we shot it over I think 15 or 16 days. We did basically 3 weeks. We basically took over this theater space in Atwater Village and built the whole thing. So we built all those sets. So the like. You know, there's the green room and the living room and the jail cell and the
set.
Yeah, there's all of those sets, and then there's a bunch of temporary sets that went up, like the shipwreck, you know, all the sand and whatever, and then the drama concept. There's, you know, we had an incredible team working on that, but we had total rule of the space for basically 3 weeks. which allowed us to shoot very quickly because we could be constantly setting up the next set while we were shooting the current scene.
Yeah. How many episodes did you do?
We did 10 episodes, which is about a little bit more than 90 minutes of content. So I think it's also going to be, I know it's going to be put together in sort of a movie format. We're selling it at Cannes in the next, our distributor is going to Cannes this month, actually. I think actually
like today
week.
probably
yeah.
is leaving.
Yeah. I think it starts next week. So yeah, he's probably leaving today for like international distribution.
Great.
Yeah. So it was like this really strange long journey, and it was. I mean, we literally never thought, oh, we'll get Jane Lynch and John Michael Higgins and Missy Pyle and Mimi Rogers and Diedrich Bader and all these people that came in and worked for one day. Like that was never.
How'd that happen?
I mean, I think the script is really good, and also, we have relationships with some of those people. Like Ellie knew Diedrich Bader, and Paul knows Missy Pyle, and Paul's also friends with Jane, and so a lot of it was calling in favors, but it was also like, hey, read the script. We're asking you to come in for 4 hours. You know what I mean? And
it'd be fun to put on a show. Yeah,
and also it was like, just so you know, no one, including Jane, we all made the same amount, and it was SAG minimum. It's, I mean, if for people outside the business, if you knew how much we made, you would laugh in our faces. It's so embarrassing. But it was like,
I think it's impressive that you had money to pay people SAG on a web series.
Yeah. Well, and and it's funny because it just adds up so quick.
Yeah.
So quick, especially with and we also had a 40-person crew.
Okay, so back up a minute. How did you raise the money for the production?
We just got one independent financer who was like,
fantastic.
I just want to invest in this project. Yeah.
It's great. So you made it. So the version I'm seeing on Amazon is the version you made.
So that's the version we made we shot that in January of 2016. Mm-hmm. And then it took a year to edit and do, sound and picture and everything. And that launched, I think, March 7th. So it was about 15 months from rolling camera to getting it up on the air.
Because it looks like you had some money.
Yeah, I mean, we had some money, but we shot 10 episodes in what a half of episode of real TV would shoot for, or a quarter. You know what I mean?
You used your money well.
Yeah.
It's all on the screen.
Yeah. And, and nobody made any money off of this. It's everyone got paid. There was not a single person there that didn't get paid, even the extra, everyone got paid.
So the daughter of a labor lawyer.
Everyone got paid. That's right. Yeah, and I think we're under the SAG New Media. I don't know our line producer.
That's probably it. The SAG New Media agreement.
The contract stuff drives me crazy, so I don't. Thank God I have to deal with that stuff. But everything else we had our hand in. I mean, I think that's another thing is so Paul and I are the EPs, but we had our hand in we were not above going and buying bottles of water or
the donuts.
Yeah, or whatever. We have our hand. I mean, this, this podcast, I just emailed you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't have a publicist. Everything is basically us. So that's both good and bad, right? We have total control, but we also don't have...
And all the work.
Yeah, we have, and we're not complaining. We like doing the work, but it's it's several skill sets, right? It's an actor is very different than a producer, and also being a pre-production or a post-production or a publicist, those are all totally different skill sets, and so it's learning all of these different skill sets.
How'd you figure it out?
Trial and error. There are a million things I probably would have done differently, but it's just sort of the one thing I learned was you'd be surprised what you can get just by asking.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier, we did this podcast called Comedy Bang Bang, which is in the top 25 podcasts, comedy podcasts, with Scott Aukerman. And I just literally sent them an email, and I was like, hey, do you want to interview us? And they were like, yeah. You know what I mean? Just ask. And same thing with all of our guest stars. My favorite scene is with John Michael Higgins, but he's a big star, and so is Jane. These people were totally down. Now we only asked them to work for 4 hours or whatever. But they still came in and worked and, elevated the piece. So, yeah, that was, I think, the biggest thing that I took away from it was just ask.
This is such a huge theme in my world right now about asking, and in particular, women asking.
Yeah.
Because it's we don't do it so often that it becomes a thing when we do.
It really, I don't know if you, read Lean In, which is Sheryl Sandberg.
Did I read Lean In?
Yeah. I thought you might have. But there's that really interesting, I don't know if it's chapter or excerpt or whatever, where she's talking about where men ask for jobs that they know they can do in the future, and women ask for jobs they are prepared to do now. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of like, why? No. I have this conversation with my husband all the time of no, just ask. You have the capability to learn the skill set, so just ask. We're all capable.
Why do we wait until we have 11 of 10 qualifications?
Yeah,
before
I actually don't. I feel like I'm more sort of, not on the woman specter on that. I'm really I'm just going to ask. I'm just going to do it. You're right. I don't have the qualifications yet, but why not?
But I know I can.
Yeah, and men do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who cares? And do I deal with adversity and do people not like me because of it? Yeah, probably, but that's okay. Do
it anyway.
Yeah, not everyone's going to like you all the time. You have to ultimately do what you think is right and honor the women who came before us, who paved the way for us. So
yes.
Yeah.
How was it being the boss?
It's interesting because, like I said, my producing partner is male, and so people definitely, I think, dealt with us in different ways.
Would they turn to him to answer the question?
No, not always. I do think that it was a comedy set, so it was pretty easygoing or whatever. And he is straight. I mean, he is white and male, but he's not straight. Mm. And so he has that sort of one adversity point, you know, with me that he gets.
He has a little bit of cred.
Yeah, he has a little bit of street cred. But there are certain times where I feel not really in my relationship with my producing partner one-on-one, but just on set in general, I do find that I have to maybe throw my weight around a little bit more, and I'm also just a small person, so I'm 5'1", I'm not that big of a person, so it's
you're a little lady.
Yeah, so I feel I have a little bit of a Napoleon complex, right, where I'm no, wait, I'm the boss, you know what I mean?
Listen to me!
And also Ellie, the director, she's a very tiny person as well, and so there's all these little tiny women sort of running, but the thing that I really appreciate about women in charge is that there's a certain level of trust as opposed to just I have the authority because I'm the boss. I think women tend to lead from a place of I'm trusting you to do your job. I hired you to do your job, so I'm going to give you the ability to do it, and I'm not going to micromanage you. And I tried to do that. I think Ellie's maybe a little bit less of a micromanager than I am. I'm still learning that skill, but that's something that I feel I really was able to watch her do with such ease. She has just a real ease about her that's really mellow. She doesn't have to throw her weight around to get ultimately what we need, and I think you see that in the product that it feels easy. And
it looked really fun.
It was. I mean, of course, it's hard to be both the producer and the actor. So
yeah.
Actually harder so to be the producer. So the scenes I'm not in, I'm watching and I'm giving notes and I'm worried about, all the things that producers worry about. But I did have to learn how to be okay, when you're an actor, you have to turn off your producing brain because otherwise it shows in the acting.
You can't be watching yourself.
Yeah, and you seem distracted. It's not, part of the thing that I think works so great about comedy is if you're comfortable and relaxed and then you're open to whatever happens and you can go with it. But if you're thinking about other things,
you're doomed.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned that the first time when we shot it for the very first time around, which is what we ended up sort of using as the pitch to get the money to shoot it the real way. Both Paul and I would come on set and be we don't know our lines because we were buying the food and painting the set until 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we'd get there and be what scene are we doing? We literally didn't know our lines.
You go into wing it because that's the thing you know how to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that was I think the biggest lesson I learned was you can't put the acting stuff last. You have to do the work and then show up as a producer, but you have to trust when you're in a scene that the other people on set will take care of it. You just can't do both. You can only do one at a time.
Whew. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a hard lesson to learn too because you want the product to be great, but in order to do that you just have to trust. You just have to go with God.
And the acting part is the part people are going to see.
Exactly.
They're not going to be like, wow, that was well produced.
Right, exactly. Or like, oh, look at how like quickly they like set the props back up so they could roll again. Nobody cares.
Look at that craft service. That was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody cares or knows. I especially people outside the business don't understand that like when you see 30 seconds of content, we could have shot that for 4 hours.
Right.
You know, for something that's just a walk down a hallway.
They have no idea what
or an
go
insert.
through.
Yeah, like an insert of a hand picking up a phone. We could have done 20 takes of that.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just an insert. You don't even remember it, you know? So, yeah, sometimes you just have to, like, remember the bigger picture and be like, okay, it's going to work out. And, you know, there are certainly scenes and things I look back on that I would have done differently. But, you know, I'm sure, like, Catherine Bigelow does that too. You know what I mean?
Who looks back and says, now that was perfect.
Right. It's like never a finished
I wouldn't
product.
change a thing.
At some point you just have to be like, cool, well, this is picture lock. Like literally, we were picture lock, we were putting in the credits, and Paul and I were sitting with our editor, and he was like trying to change things. And it was like, no.
Stop.
It's picture locked. We're just adding credits. You know what I mean?
It is good enough, and it has to go out.
Yeah, and there are just certain things like, you know, you don't always get someone's best take because it was out of focus or, you know, somebody else messed up or whatever. Like you have to, that's one thing that I really learned as a producer of like how much gets sacrificed. Like what you see is definitely not always the best performance. You have to choose the thing that fits with the rest of everything that's going, all of the other elements.
And the angles and the cuts and the story and the...
Yeah.
Now, going back to being the boss, did you have to really think about and adjust how you talk to people, how you communicated, how you presented yourself?
Because I was both, or because I'm a woman, or
all of it?
I mean, I think I'm pretty. Yeah, I think I'm sort of hyper aware of that, maybe to a fault. It's complicated because when you're, so I'm the sort of. Paul's the sort of lead male and I'm the lead female, so that means I have to have a nice rapport with the actors to maintain the funny on set. So like you don't want to be too much of a boss so they like feel weird with you or intimidated or angry or anything, right? So it's this balance.
Because you're one of them.
Like, right, because you want to fit in and you want to feel like they can play, we can play on set and they feel comfortable with me, but at the same time I need to be able to make executive decisions. So it was definitely a real balancing act. And, you know, Paul and I had a lot of sort of powwows, like during lunch. In the beginning, we would go and sit with the rest of the cast and sort of like take time to chill out. And then by like day 3, we were like, we just can't do this. We need to have time where we basically had meetings during lunch, sort of how's the day going? What are we behind on? What do we need to work on? Like it became sort of production meeting time during lunch and figuring out how we reassess for how things are going and things that need to change for the rest of the day or the rest of the production. So I was definitely really aware of that, and I think sometimes I did it really well and sometimes I didn't. You know, like, I'm human. Like,
it's a lot.
It's a lot, and the days are so long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know, you're often getting there at 6:30 and then leaving at 9, and...
an hour 12. You know, how's it going? And
also, like, you're there an hour early as a producer, like, going up to the production office and just being like, where are we on the paperwork? Like, are we, you know, do we have that guest star? Do we have their paperwork that's coming in 3 days? Like, thinking about all of that. And then at the end of the day, doing a walkthrough and planning the shots for tomorrow, like, Paul and Ellie and I would walk through. I also was fairly sick for a lot of it. Like, we just, like, I think we worked ourselves sort of ragged in the month of December. So by the time it got to January, we were all pretty exhausted.
So you're supposed to fall apart when it's over.
Right. And I mean, there were 2 or 3 days where I left after my scenes because I was just like, you know, I gotta try to get better because I can't show up and be an actor. Yeah, and like there were just like I had this costume where I'm wearing this like enormous sort of like quinceañera ball gown, and it's like a very tight corset, you know, so you're already a little bit compromised. Yeah, and it's really hot under the lights and all that, so it was like, you know, not everything was always in our favor in that respect. So, yeah, there were a couple of days where I just sort of had to, like, be an actor first and let my producing stuff go to the side and go home and sleep it off.
Yeah. So your next acting job, did it feel like a vacation?
It was just really different because it was like, I was sitting off to the side waiting for my scene. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think the next thing I shot was Doubt, which was a show on CBS, which was a great show that got canceled. That had Katie Heigl from Grey's Anatomy was on it, and Dulé Hill and Laverne Cox. I actually had a really long shoot day because I was in a court scene, and we shot all of the court stuff, like everyone's stuff in every angle. But I had so much downtime just to hang out, and it was really weird because usually in that downtime I would be over by the monitor and doing
like, what do I have to do? What's my list?
Yeah, I liked it, but I was also, it's funny because I like producing, but I don't think I love it as much as Paul does. But then when I wasn't doing it, I was a little like, oh, this is kind of boring. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're there, I don't know, I probably had at least a 12-hour day. And, you're only up and working for, 30 minutes, or whatever, like by the time.
But like, were you thinking, I could do so much more here?
Yeah, kind of, or I was just sort of like, a little bit like, this is what I always wanted, but like, I'm like, oh, is it what I want? Like, it's so much, like that joke of like, hurry up and wait and hurry up and wait. Like, there's just so much. I think there's an idea of like, making television is so glamorous, and it's like, so the opposite of glamorous.
Sunglasses and autographs.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so much time of like, sitting around and like, and it's actually really hard to get, like, I brought a book, but it's actually really hard to get stuff done because there's so much motion and you have to be paying attention because you have to, when they're ready for you, they're ready for you, so you can't go anywhere, you can't, and it was just a weird thing of like, which do I like better? Do I like being super busy, like where I'm a producer and an actor, or is it nice to just sit? And I kind of like both, but there was a little bit of
for everything.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of nostalgia. I think I appreciated the producer stuff a little bit more when I had stepped away from it, and was like, oh, there is so much downtime, and we wait for these opportunities to be on set, and we think that it's going to be like the most amazing, and I'm so grateful, and I love doing it, and I continue to do it, but it's not. I think people think that you're just like sitting on set, like elated for 12 hours, and it's like,
it's hard to keep that up.
It is like that, like the first 2 or 3 gigs you do. And then after you've done it a bunch of times, you're like, you realize like, okay, you're always looking for the next gig. And like, it's a
job.
Freelance. Yeah, it is a job. I think people forget that it's a job. And everyone else knows it's a job. Like, the first AD and the director and the other actors.
Oh, it's a job.
They know.
Yeah.
And it's a very specific job. Like, don't show up for anything else. Like, especially when you're a co-star or a guest star, you are there in service of the leads, and you're there to push the story along. Don't make it about you, because that's not. You're there to, like, do some exposition for somebody else. That's what your job is. So.
Wow, that's great advice.
I mean, that is, like, being a co-star is pushing a story along, always. Like, I had this great acting teacher, Eden Bernardi, who actually passed away last year, and she always used to say, be a gracious guest. And that's a note she used to give me all the time, is like, don't show up, like if someone's throwing like an Italian, feast, and you're sort of someone's +1, don't show up with like a main course. You're a guest of a guest. Just bring a nice bottle of wine. You know what I mean? Like, you don't be the guest that they ask you to be, like the host will, So if you're a series regular, you're the host. But if you're a co-star, you're a +1. So just bring a nice bottle of wine. Like, don't bring more. And I always used to do that. I would show up as a co-star and try to bring like cannolis or and it's like, no, that's not appropriate. And you're not going to get the job, like know your place in the pecking order, and you can move your way up to a guest star and a series regular and other things in film, but you really have to just realize where you are, and they're not less important. You know what I mean? Like, if someone didn't say like, welcome to Seattle Grace or whatever, like, then that's important to know. Oh, okay, now we know where Ellen Pompeo's character is.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And she didn't have to say it. That's important.
But know what it is.
Yeah, but know exactly what it is.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
Do you do this thing now, like, I'll give you an example. I did a bunch of game shows in the 90s. And I had a production background, and I would sit on the set at the game show and start doing the math. Like, how much does this day cost?
Right. Oh, you mean
like,
you were in production? I thought you meant you were a contestant. I was like,
no, I was a contestant on the game show.
Oh, you were?
But in my life, I worked in production.
Oh.
So I would sit on set and budget the day, just because I was sitting there.
Yeah.
Like, do you find yourself doing that now on the set?
I do a little bit, and I look around and go, like, do you know how much money you could save?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, we made it work for so little, and I see, like, something like Grey's Anatomy, they don't make shows like that. They have, like, 10 series, like, 10, like, leads on that show. They just
expensive.
That show is so expensive. I remember I was sitting in a makeup chair once, and people were talking about it. Like, they just don't make those kind of shows anymore. They're just too expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do that. And I also, even on other sort of, like, I'm shooting a web series called Tough Love coming up at the end of the month, and I know, like, while I'm on set, it's going to be hard to, like, not be a producer, you know? And I also have a lot of people that, I just actually got an email from a women's group that I'm in, was someone saying, like, hey, do you have any ideas about distribution? Like, a lot of people are now coming to me, asking me questions, and, like, you know, there are things, we went down a lot of dead ends, so I actually have a lot more advice sort of about things not to do than things that worked.
Okay, so walk us through how did you get it on Amazon journey?
So
tell us all the things that didn't work.
So the ultimate thing that worked is we have this guy named Tom Malloy who works for a company called Glass House, and they did all the distribution. So they got it on the streaming services, and they're the ones that are selling it at Con, and that's money well spent for me.
Yeah.
Because it's a ton of work. The things that didn't work for us, the thing that's so confusing about it is we have these, like, we have a big name, right? Like, we have Jane, but it is short format. So we got a bunch of meetings at all of these networks, and they sort of were trying to figure out, like, can we do short format, or can we put episodes together to make it a half hour? And we ultimately learned that, like, this still is, like, even though there's a million web series, it still doesn't know what it is yet. And the things that are really successful tend to still be 22-minute or half-hour formats. Like,
and the networks are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, like I'm really obsessed with a show called Schitt's Creek right now. I don't know if you watch that. It's
SCH.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't it Canadian?
It's Canadian. Yeah. It's Eugene Levy or Levi.
Oh, yes.
And his son created it, Daniel, and Catherine Hahn plays the mom, and Eugene and Daniel play they are dad and son in real life and also in the show. But you can tell it's just like a labor of love that they did together. But again, it's a 22-minute. It's a half-hour format. So I haven't seen something like ours. It's like an 8 to 10-minute format.
Yeah.
Like, quite take off yet, and I don't know how. I think they're still trying to figure it out, right? Like places like Comedy Central, or, you know, even Lifetime has a lot of stuff now. There's all of these networks that are like,
everyone has a digital division,
exactly,
and they're still doing hour dramas on it.
Yeah, and there's things like ABC Digital and Freeform and all that. Although the stuff on that is sort of geared towards, I think, like 13 to 18 or whatever, and ours is a little bit more.
And it's
adult.
ABC Family that changed their name.
Yeah, which is Disney.
Right.
So that'll tell you a little bit about the kind of content they're taking. But we have had more meetings and more agents than anyone you've ever met in your whole life. And ultimately, the thing that got this show made was an independent financer and blood, sweat, and tears from me and Paul and Mandy and Ellie. And, you know, it was just ultimately like we just had to sort of like say goodbye to everything and be like, fuck it. Oh, can I say that?
Yeah.
Darn it. Okay.
You can now have to mark it explicit. Great.
We had to ultimately say, in case you want, we had to ultimately say, darn it, like we're just going to do it ourselves, you know? Yeah. And so I think you have to listen to your gut and just and know that whatever decision you're making is the right decision, and you just don't know where things are going to go. Just like this, like the show's been out, we haven't gotten the analytics from Amazon yet. We have no idea, you know, like it's, you know, we're getting great reviews and blah, 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 but like we don't know the numbers yet, you know, so who knows?
And it's been your ticket to get in all the meetings.
Yeah, it has. And also, like I said, I had this audition this week. It was the first time where a casting director was like, essentially I brought you in because I saw you on the show and I thought you were great. Mission accomplished. Yeah. Although I kind of feel like I bombed the audition because she was so effusive that had never happened to me before that it threw me. So you're freaked out? Yeah, it freaked me out a little bit. Like I felt like suddenly she was a fan and then there was this expectation, and who knows? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Like if I don't book this, like she's a fan, she'll bring me in for something else. You know? But that was the ultimate goal, right? Like if we go back to like Paul and I just wanted to get tape to be able to get auditions. So now that's done. Worked. Yeah. So hopefully that'll lead to more auditions and more jobs, and I mean, who knows? And who knows what it'll be in 10 years? Like maybe everything will be a web series in 10 years.
I think it's going to take less than that.
Yeah.
Has this changed your perspective on kind of how you want your career to go? Because now you're a creator.
It has a little bit. I mean, you know, I've said this from like the day I moved here. My ultimate goal, I really want to be like number 4 on the call sheet. Like, I want to be Sandra Oh in Grey's Anatomy. I want to be in like an hour long where I'm like sort of the funny, like comedy relief, but I have the opportunity to do drama as well, and I don't have to carry the whole show. Like, I don't want to be Ellen Pompeo. I want to be Sandra Oh. And so
that is very specific.
Yeah, that's what I want. Like, I think that's
you want to be Paris Geller.
Yeah, you have to know what you are. You know, like, could I play a lead in like an indie? Yeah, I could. But on television, I'm not really a television lead, and that's okay. And nor do I don't want the responsibility of like having to be Kerry Washington. Like, she has so many lines and so much responsibility. Yeah. I don't want that. Like, I would rather be Katie Lowe's, you know, like, I want to be in support of the lead and have storylines, but not the whole arc of the show on my back. Like, it's so much responsibility, and those people work so much. I think people don't understand that, like, they're working all the time, and they have families, and like, when they're on red carpets and doing promotion and doing stuff like this is work. This is press is work. Yeah. And they're doing it all the time, and then having, like, they finish work and they have to go in and do looping and ADR and all this kind of stuff, and, you know, and then go home and memorize for the next day. Like, it's just a
and then can't walk down the street.
Right, and then you can't. It's funny, I was in a meeting with Lisa Kudrow, and we were going to go, like, get lemonade, or go to this restaurant, Lemonade, and she didn't want to walk there because she was just going to get mobbed. I don't know if I should tell the story, but you know what I mean? Like, she didn't want to walk 4 blocks because she's a private person. And it was total. I just remember being in the room and I was like, I don't get it. I don't personally get it.
I can imagine what
but
that
is. But I can imagine, like, yeah. You know, like, she just wants to, like, live her life, and she can't walk 4 blocks to get lunch without being mobbed, you know? Yeah. And that's another reason is, like, my goal was never to be famous. I don't want to be Jennifer Lawrence. Like, that's not what I want. I want to be Stanley Tucci. You know, like, I want to be a working actor where people go, oh, she looks familiar. I don't even necessarily remember what she's from. You know?
And you know what? There's a lot more of those.
There are so many actors that make a great living. You have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
And some of them are just on commercials, or they're on some quiet show on USA that you're not watching, but they've been doing it for 8 seasons, and they make really good money. And
right, then you see him at school, and you're like, oh, that guy seems familiar.
Yeah. You're, like, picking up your kid, and it's, like, someone's dad. Yeah.
Oh, there have been shows where I look at the scene, and everyone in the scene is a dad at my school.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, so school networking works.
I'm telling you, school networking, yeah. I don't have kids yet, but actually the guy who plays Dumbfuck on our show, Domphoc, just so you guys know, he is the, like, sort of brown guy that plays all the brown roles, which is on purpose and a social commentary. But anyway, he has 2 kids, and I mean, he's constantly talking about there's a ton of networking that's happening.
Yeah.
He's over in Valley Village, and it's all, like, I mean, he practically got us meetings from you know, other dads and moms that work at CBS.
School is writers, producers, and actors.
Yeah,
as far as I can tell.
I listened to this podcast that had Constance Zimmer, and she had been offered the lead in Unreal, and she was like, it was shooting at the time in Atlanta, and she's like, I have a kid, I don't want to do this. She passed on it. Then they decided to move it to Toronto, and they kept offering it, she passed, and then she was at a fundraiser for her daughter's kindergarten class, and the Lifetime exec from the Lifetime exec was at this, they had the same, you know, teacher or whatever, and finally in person she just said, will you just shoot the pilot? Just shoot the pilot. And she shot the pilot and fell in love with it. But it was like,
thank God she did it. I love that show.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a lead that I would play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But those kind of leads only happen on cable.
Yeah.
And also Constance Zimmer, you know, she's someone who's been like, she was on Seinfeld. Like, that show, like, I mean, she had a tiny little guest spot. I'm just saying, like, she's been working long enough to have been on Seinfeld, which has been off the air for whatever.
The 20-year overnight success.
Yeah, like, she has been working forever. Mm-hmm. And, like, I don't really feel like she became a household name even though she was on Entourage, I feel like Unreal made her, even Jane, Glee made her a superstar.
Yes.
And she had 1,000 credits, including all of these Christopher Guest movies and 40-Year-Old Virgin and all this stuff.
It's so fun to now go back and see these people like, oh my God.
Oh, in everything. Yeah, they're in everything.
Yeah, that's so fun. It's fun for us. They've been working hard for many, many years.
Yeah, but it also like gives you a little bit of like, oh, okay, like Michael Chiklis, I remember reading an article about him, like he was like waiting tables until he was 40. Like when he got the Shield, like, you know, he'd been doing this forever.
Yeah.
Because there are certainly days where I'm like, how much longer can I do this? Like, at this level. And I've had a lot more success than a lot of my friends, but I've also had a lot less success than other ones of my friends, right? Like, it's this weird spectrum of like, like, the guy Malcolm Barrett who plays my assistant, he basically did me this favor doing this tiny part. We met doing the Hurt Locker, and he was simultaneously shooting Timeless, which unfortunately just got canceled. But he's been a series regular on a million things. He works all the time, you know, and it just seems so effortless when he does it.
Yeah.
He's also just so funny and so talented, and also just really fun to be around. Like, we literally overlap for maybe 24 hours. Whatever, 15 years ago or 12 years ago or whenever we shot, and we're still friends. He's the only person I still talk to from the movie. It's insane. But so you have these friends that are just working all the time, and you look at them and you're like, how? They're not necessarily doing anything different, and they're not any happier or any, you know, it's just we're all sort of moving at our own pace and figuring it out.
So what does keep you going?
This is such a cliche answer, but my husband is like such an incredible support. He was an actor. We actually met doing a play, and he's a director now, and so he gets the journey, and ultimately, you know, what we would like is for me to get a series regular, and then he could just be freelance directing all the time. You know what I mean? Because it's been a real ebb and flow in terms of who's bringing in the money, and it's nice to be in a double earning home, so you don't, like, sometimes you can make more or less. You don't, you know, when I was in my 20s, it was just on me to make all the money. So that's been nice, of like that support. And also just like, I don't know, at some point you just have to have the blind faith of like,
that you're doing the right thing.
that you're doing the right thing. And if one day I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, then I won't.
So here's the question. If you were doing anything else, what would it be?
You know, nothing, because if I could, I would. Like,
see, that's how you know you're an actor.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The question.
Is so funny is that, like, I always say that it chose me and I didn't choose it, because there are so many, like I have the skill set for a lot of other, like, I'm, unlike most actors, like, I'm really organized and I'm really good at numbers. Like, I have that whole side of the brain that, like, I never liked English or history, which most actors
You can be a producer.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm like, I can't tell you how many people have been like, will you be my manager? And I'm like, no, because I'm not here to make your career. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because I know that if I had these other careers, there's such a obvious ladder to climb, and I feel like I could sort of reach success very quickly in those ways, but I haven't had that. There's no ladder in acting. It can happen overnight or it can happen over 40, you know, you just don't know. So I would if I could, but the answer is nothing. There are a million things I have the skill set to do. Everyone has.
If you had to, you could figure out how to earn a living, but this is
yeah. Like
passion.
I said, I worked at a law firm. I was a bookkeeper. That's a very weird, specific, skill set. I don't know. I wouldn't do teaching or food service. Those are two things that I don't like, and I'm not good at. I guess I'd say.
What is next for you?
So I'm writing a lot. I'm also a community organizer, so I've been spending a lot of time on that because the world is such a scary place right now.
What's going on?
So that's been taking up. I've been trying to find the balance of like, when is it okay to sort of step away and be an artist, and how does art and activism sort of intersect. I've been trying to sort of figure that out. I'm just writing and auditioning, and like I said, I'm doing this web series called Tough Love coming up in May, and I shot a film last year, or maybe at the end of 2015, called All I Want, that's premiering at the Dances with Films Festival in Hollywood in June, so I'll be going to that.
Great.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I had an audition yesterday, so we'll see how that goes.
By the time this airs, you could be a series regular.
That's right. Yeah, plugging along, like the true life of every actor, we don't usually know, again, unless you're Jennifer Lawrence or someone, you don't have your next gig necessarily lined up, so.
Are you a success?
Yes.
Good job answering that question. Good job. Are you a badass?
Yes. Yeah. I do, that's one thing I feel the success is harder to say, like, yes, but the badass, like, I do feel like I live my life very unapologetically, and I do what I want, and I say what I mean, and, a lot of people don't like that, both in a lot of ways. Mostly politically, people don't like what I say, but, like, I don't, ultimately, like, you only live once, and so this is who I am, and it's taken me, this many years to sort of figure out what my voice is, and so I'm just going to, like, continue to unapologetically be that, and, some people aren't going to like me, and that's okay.
You might as well be authentic.
Yeah, exactly, and you know what? Authenticity, I feel like, ultimately, because you look at these people that wouldn't necessarily be, like, leads in things, and you go, why did that person... Even, like, I don't know why I keep bringing this up, but even, like, a Jennifer Lawrence, like, she's so beautifully flawed. Like, if you see her in an interview, she's so awkward and, like, you know what I mean? She'll be like, and then my brother, like...
she says.
Yeah, she'll be like, my brother, like, thinks I'm an asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she just, like... She's so authentically herself, and I think that's a thing that people like about her. Or Lena Dunham, like, I know a lot of people don't like her, but she is so authentically who she is.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah, or Issa Rae, or all of these women that are coming out and just being authentically themselves, and I think a lot of women can identify with that and go, oh, I'm that awkward person. I'm that insecure person. I'm that whatever. You know what I mean? If you don't necessarily physically look like that person, but identifying character traits and going, oh, right, we're not all, Julia Roberts. Mm-hmm. Like we are. Most of us are closer to Issa Rae or Lena Dunham.
There's something so delicious about it. Like you can't get enough when someone is really just their own flawed self out there in the world.
Yeah, and also, like, just because we love that person, a lot of people don't like them. Mm-hmm. And, it's a pretty terrible thing to be a woman on the internet, if I'm just being honest. And, like, at some point you just have to go, like, that's part of it, and hopefully the world will change over time. And, people are going to say really mean things to you, and it shouldn't stop you from doing what you do.
How did you get to a point of, I don't care if they like me?
My mom is really like that. Like, everyone in my family is, like, fiercely independent and, like, really opinionated, which, is good and bad. It's kind of hard when everyone is headstrong in a family of 5. But I just, like... I don't know, ultimately you just can't be anything other than yourself, and like, I don't, like, when I say things that upset people, I really mean them, like, I really, like, you know what I mean? I'm thinking more politically, but like, I that is really genuinely my opinion, and if it's not...
And you're okay with, and you can be upset about it.
Yeah, and I'm also, like, willing to talk to you about it if you have a different opinion. I don't want you just to, like, yell... you're a stupid whore at me or whatever, which that's what people do on the internet, but...
It's not helpful.
Right, it's not helpful, and it's also just sort of like, if you want to talk in a real way, I'm totally, like, willing to listen. Genuinely.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're probably going to convince each other either way, but I'm totally open to listening, because I think ultimately people want respect, and people want the same things, right? Like, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want to be respected. Like, that's the same thing I want. And we might not agree on the way to get there, and that's fine.
But we probably have more in common than we think.
Yeah, I think definitely we do. I think that, it's a very polarizing time, but, yeah, I think that I do have strong opinions, and I'm willing to express them, but I'm also willing to listen to what other people have to say. And, you're probably not going to sway my opinion, but But maybe you will. I don't know. Maybe you'll have something that I haven't thought of. Who knows?
Something new.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for young women coming up?
Again, it's authenticity. I just had I often have coffee with friends that are just moving here, and I just had coffee with a friend from college, and she was like, I got to drop 15 pounds. And I was like, why? You know what I mean? This is, I think you're more castable. First of all, she's not overweight at all. But, I think you're more castable as your truth. Like, you look like how real women look. Like what, you're a size 6 or something? Like, that's.
But does anyone want to see
thin.
real women?
Well, that's another conversation. But it's like, you just have to be yourself, and that's the thing that's going to set you apart. So I would say, spend less time like getting new headshots and like, figuring out your best hair color and all that, and figure out who you are, because that's the thing that's going to set you apart in the room, and that's the thing that's going to get you cast is like, oh, she was interesting. I liked her. And even if she's not right for this, I'm going to bring her back. Also, I would say, really study to be an actor. There's nothing worse than like the pretty girl from Omaha who moved here who has no experience, because it's why they're hiring a bunch of British actors to take roles, is because they're actually training.
They're trained. Yeah.
But I would also say move here as quick as you can. Don't wait, because it's a long road. It's a long journey. So don't wait. Just get out here and stick with it, and continue to be in class. I'm in class. There's people in my class that are series regulars. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people that I used to workshop years ago, and I would see people that were working all the time in workshops. Like, you got to keep working on your craft. Like a doctor doesn't like stop learning new techniques. Like, so why should an actor? Like, you should just keep training, be yourself, and be here for the long haul. I think are the ultimate advice that I would give my younger self anyway.
Great. How do we find you?
At Kate Mines at everything, on Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Facebook, but I'm very inactive there, and mostly political, so you don't. That's all the other
well, now I'm curious. That's the first thing I'm going to look up.
KATEMINES. And then you can follow the show at Dropping the Soap on Instagram and Twitter. And it's also on Facebook.
Great. And the new web series is called what?
Oh, Tough Love.
Where can they find that?
I don't know. We haven't even shot it yet.
Oh.
So, I don't know. But yeah, check it out. I mean, it's up on IMDb, and who knows?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. You've been listening to The Other 50%, A History of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Kate Mines for telling us her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and Stitcher, Podbay, Overcast, and subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to it. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, pictures, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter at Other50%, and Instagram at Other50% Podcast. And don't forget to check out The Other 50%, A History of Tech. It's on a different stream, so you have to subscribe separately. Thanks for listening. See you next time.